Right, we've just gone past 1 o'clock, so we'll make a start. If I can just remind people to switch phones off or put them onto silent, we'll make a start. First item, membership of the committee. It looks as though we're all here that's supposed to be. Number 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree? Thank you. Item 3, interests and lobbying. I'll start with Councillor Kay. Yeah. Rob.
Similarly, agenda item 9.
Andrew. Donna.
Agenda item 9.
Item 9. And myself, many on item 9. Item 4, admission of the public. It is a public meeting. It is webcast also. Item 5, deputations and petitions. Thank you. Item 6, any public questions? No. Site visits took place this morning. We did one over at Sootill in Batley and we also, on his way out, went to Old Bank Road in Mayfield. That application has been withdrawn, but seeing as we're going out that way, might as well have a look. Planning applications now. First one is page 11, and this is the Dyson Woodway at Bradley. Victor.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for full planning permission relating to a 4.7 hectare site within the Bradley Business Park. This is phase 3 of the Bradley Business Park. Members will recall a position statement was previously considered by the committee on the 5th of July of this year. Changes made to the proposal since then are detailed in the committee report. I should also draw members' attention to the committee update. The recommendation has changed to now refer to a Section 111 agreement, a £15,000 travel plan monitoring fee and conditions recently recommended by Highways Development Management Officers and the Coal Authority. The site is surrounded by commercial, mainly office uses to the north and west in Cartwright Court and Pelham Place, residential to the east on Redwood Drive, Miramar and Grantley Place. There is a school further to the west and residential and other uses further to the north. The site slopes downhill from north to south. There is also a less steep slope from west to east and variation in topography within the site. Residential properties immediately to the east are at a lower level than the immediately adjacent land within the application site. The site is accessed from Dyson Wood Way. It's an accessible site, although public transport options in the area are limited. In turn, Dyson Wood Way is accessed from Bradley Road via a signalised junction. Along the west edge of the site is Old Lane, which is a track which is adopted highway. This forms part of the Kirklees Way, and as can be seen in this image, the site is currently vacant and partly overgrown. This is a view from the east. This is the rear garden of 39 Grantley Place at ground floor level. From the ground floor patio, you can see that the garden there slopes upwards towards the site, and then land beyond that fence continues sloping upwards in a westerly direction. And this is the view from the same property from first floor level. This is the view from another property to the east of the site at 15 Miramar. Members will recall visiting this garden on the 5th of July. The site is also visible from the south. This is a view from the junction of Wigan Lane and Newhouse Road. And if I zoom in, the site is there. Another view from the south, this is the junction of Wigan Lane and Tenterhill Lane, and the site is here. The site is not in a conservation area. There are no listed buildings within or near to the site. The site is the subject of UDP allocation for B1 business use only. However, the proposed allocation for employment, i.e. all B uses, is proposed in the local plan. There is ancient woodland to the southwest of the site and also other areas of ancient woodland in the surrounding area as shown in this slide. The proposal is for an industrial building, use classes B2 and B8 of 17,127 square metres. This will be used for general industrial and storage and distribution uses. At the north of the site, a smaller 3-storey building for offices and research and development is proposed. That's use classes B1A and B1B. That will be 1,701 square metres in size. Just where the arrow is here, a 374 square metre storage unit is proposed. Just to the north of that small circle is an isopar tank. And then around the site, associated internal roads, car parking spaces for 286 vehicles, service yard and landscaping, including buffer planting along the east and west edges, are also proposed. In terms of land use and the principle of development, the site is only allocated for B1 use in the UDP. Therefore, the office and research and development building is policy compliant. However, the larger building is not, hence the advertisement of the application as a departure. However, since 2015, the Council has proposed a more flexible approach to employment sites, resulting in the proposed reallocation for the site for all B uses in the local plan. The local plan has passed through most stages of adoption, and the Inspector's interim letter of the 15th of June of this year raised no objection to reallocation. Therefore, significant weight can be attached to that proposed allocation. However, that proposed allocation does not mean relevant considerations fall away. Obviously, highways, amenity and other impacts still must be considered by the committee. The applicant is Aflex Hose, who make hoses lined with polytetrafluoroethylene, PTFE, that's Teflon in its most well-known format, for automotive, food, pharmaceutical and other industries. The processes undertaken by the applicant are highly skilled processes, and on-site research and development is also carried out by the applicant. These activities closely accord with the priorities of the Kirklees economic strategy, to which positive weight can be attached. 280 jobs would move from Aflex Hoses' 4 sites in Calderdale, with short-term plans to expand the workforce to 300 and to 500 by 2028. 9 apprenticeships are currently being run by the applicant, and this is expected to increase to 15 by the end of this year. In terms of design, I should say this image is out of date. The cladding of the larger building has changed. The office and research and development building has moved and its materials have changed, and the parking areas have reduced in size, but still it's a useful image because the shape of the larger building hasn't changed and its footprint and location within the site haven't changed either. The layout is proposed to keep massing away from the residential properties to the east, but also to accommodate the needs of the applicant, buffer planting and to enable the placing of the applicant's offices on the Dyson Wood Way frontage of the site. This is another 3D image provided by the applicant. It is also out of date in that the material colours have changed. This is a view from close to the southeast corner of the application site. In the foreground, you can see the drainage swales that are proposed as part of the applicant's drainage strategy. And just to illustrate, that's the viewpoint location of that previous 3D image. This is not the image that residents requested. It doesn't show a ground level view of the development from that corner. However, it is of use to members to help understand the scale of the development. A functional purpose-built B2 and B8 factory is proposed. This would accommodate long, 120-metre long hose production lines and would work with the site's topography. With the proposed soft landscaping and the design amendments that have been made during the life of the application, the factory is considered acceptable in design terms. Now, in these elevational images, these are up to date and they show that the upper cladding colour has changed to pale grey. These are just internal sections illustrating how the development would work with the topography of the site, which, as mentioned before, slopes downhill from north to south. And these are longer sections of the site. I mentioned pale grey cladding. These are examples of similar cladding in Kirklees, which also show how this cladding can work well with natural stone, which is now proposed for the ground floor of the office and research and development building fronting Dysonwood Way. This building is also, since members last saw this case at Strategic Planning Committee, has moved 3 metres to the east away from Pelham Place, which is the office building on the right-hand side of this image. With these changes in the materials and the position of the building and the addition of windows at ground floor level, officers believe the appearance of this building is now acceptable. These are more detailed elevations of the building that would front the highway. There are not anticipated to be any harm to heritage assets in the area as a result of this development. In terms of amenity, many objections have been received from residents on amenity grounds. This is understandable, given that residents immediately adjacent to the site do currently look out onto an undeveloped green space, and given that B2 and B8 uses can cause unacceptable impacts. In this case, however, buildings will be set well away, 50 metres or more, from the nearest residential properties to the east on Grantley Place, Miramar and Redwood Drive, and significant intervening tree planting is proposed. In response to member concerns expressed on the 5th of July, the applicant has increased tree planting in their proposals and has agreed to include semi-mature and evergreen trees and shrubs to ensure screening is provided early on and year-round and isn't entirely dependent on young trees maturing. Previously, outlook and natural light impacts of the development are considered acceptable. Adverse odour impacts were predicted by the applicant at 4 residential properties. However, since members last saw this scheme, fume scrubbers and carbon filters have now been proposed by the applicant, and the application is considered acceptable in terms of odour impacts. The factory would operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but with most and the noisiest activities proposed during normal weekday hours. Further information provided since this case last came to committee has been provided regarding car park noise, and the noise impacts of the entire development are considered acceptable. The applicant's analysis predicts no adverse impact on the Bradley Road, Lees Road air quality management area and not significant impacts on the wider area. These conclusions are accepted. However, mitigation measures to a value of £92,727 are required. This can be secured. The details of these measures can be secured by condition. In terms of light pollution and light spread, this is an image illustrating the spread of light at night time. This obviously needs careful control, given the residential and the sensitive ancient woodland nearby. However, the proposals are considered acceptable, and a condition controlling light spillage has been recommended by environmental health officers. In terms of highways impacts, the applicant predicts 74 AM peak arrivals and 74 PM peak departures by staff, and a reduction on the 27 delivery vehicles that currently visit Aflex Hoses 4 sites daily. The applicant proposes a shuttle bus service from Brighouse and other locations for up to 100 of its employees. The applicant's analysis indicates that the 3 nearest junctions to the site would continue to function within capacity. Further sensitivity testing was carried out based on the applicant's expansion plans to increase the size of its workforce to 500 people by 2028, and also a without staff shuttle bus scenario has been tested as well by the applicant. In these scenarios, capacity exceedance at the Bradley Bar roundabout is predicted in 2028. This highlights the need for an effective travel plan to encourage sustainable transport use and discourage private car use, and this is recommended to be secured with an appropriate monitoring fee in a Section 106 agreement. It's also to be noted that capacity improvements to the Bradley Bar roundabout and in fact the entire A641 corridor are currently being considered by Kirklees and Calderdale councils. 334 car parking spaces were proposed by the applicant. This has now been reduced to 286 at officers' request. This on-site provision, it is considered, strikes the right balance between discouraging car use and providing enough on-site spaces so staff don't park on nearby streets. In terms of ecology and trees, the proposals and the requirements of the recommended conditions would ensure net biodiversity gains as required by planning policy would be achieved. Further representations have been received from residents regarding biodiversity, and I would draw members' attention to the committee update for specific comments on bluebells and other issues raised by residents. The adjacent ancient woodland, which is the paler green area in the bottom left-hand corner of this image, necessitates a 15-metre wide tree-planted buffer inside the site. However, it's been recently established that this can't be achieved in full because a 6-metre wide sewer easement with a restrictive covenant preventing tree planting passes through this area that is marked on this image. So officers considered it appropriate to secure essentially the next best thing, which would be a woodland ride, i.e. a linear open space within the woodland either side of the sewer easement, planted with grass and other plants attractive to butterflies and moths, which had been noted by officers as already existing on site, already present on site. Some losses of trees are proposed within the site. This is regrettable but can be mitigated. A £6,000 contribution has been agreed to by the applicant. Residents have recently submitted a peer review of the applicant's arboricultural information. This has been reviewed by officers. However, the criticisms that the author of that report made in relation to the applicant's information are considered unfounded. There are no veteran trees or ancient woodland within the site itself. The Council's Biodiversity Officer and Arboricultural Officer have both confirmed that their latest comments are in line with the new NPPF. In relation to flood risk, no objections from the lead local flood authority or Yorkshire Water have been received. However, further details of drainage proposals are required. These can be conditioned. In relation to ground conditions, there are no objections regarding contaminated land. The previous coal authority objection has been withdrawn now. Representations from residents and members of the public have been significant. In response to the Council's initial consultation, over 400 objections from over 290 properties were received. One letter of support was received. In the recent reconsultation, 389 objections have been received. An online petition has been set up and attracted over 1,000 signatories. A video, slides and images have also been submitted recently, and residents, Chair, you will be aware, have asked members to see these. The main objections from residents relate to land use. The B2 and B8 uses proposed are considered inappropriate. Many residents were not aware of the proposed local plan reallocation. Amenity impacts, congestion, ecological and tree impacts and design. Specific objections to substances including PTFE and isopar that Aflex House would use have been raised. However, adequate controls are provided under non-planning legislation. Planning obligations would need to include apprenticeships and local employment initiatives, and travel plan implementation and an appropriate monitoring fee and a contribution towards tree planting. In summary, the proposed development has benefits in relation to job creation, skills and training, local supply chain spend, and the proposed development being in accordance with aspects of the Kirklees economic strategy. The proposal does have shortcomings. However, where these would not be fully mitigated, the residual harm is considered to be comfortably outweighed by the benefits. Officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions and a Section 111 agreement, which would in turn secure a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Right, first speaker, we've got Flora Harding.
Thank you. I work for a company called One World Arboriculture. My job is to survey trees and provide tree-related advice. Trees are a material consideration within the planning system, and various reports have been submitted with this application. I've been asked by the local community to peer review this information, as they did not feel it was an accurate record of the findings on the site. Having done this, I have many points of concern which would lead me to conclude that the tree-related information provided is not at the required standard. I do have a couple of questions. The first one is, I would like to ask the Chair if the tree officer has visited the site and checked the accuracy of the information supplied. My concerns are based on several factors. Firstly, the importance of the site as a greenway and connecting corridor. From a walk of a portion of the site, I believe that some of the site was originally a part of the two adjacent ancient woodlands and has been opened up and then managed for grazing as wood pasture. These precious habitats are recognised within the various planning-related documents, such as local plans and within Section 15 of the NPPF. Yet there is no mention of this within the reports I have read, and Joe Robertson also noted this is missing. All that is said is that there is high biodiversity in areas where trees T16, G2, G3 and G4 were surveyed. I do feel that the reports have been heavily edited to play down the findings on the site. Some of the trees are over 100 years old. I believe this site acts as a valuable connecting corridor between the adjacent ancient woodlands. This is currently not recognised and would be lost when the site is developed to the extent as this proposal states. This plot of land is called Lower Fell Greve, which is the same name as the adjacent ancient woodland. And to the east is Bradley Gate Wood, which is an ancient replanted woodland. The Ancient Woodland Inventory Handbook for England, published this year in May, states that wood pastures, often with populations of veteran trees, have in the main not been included, in the Ancient Woodland Inventory because their low tree density meant that they do not register as woodland on the historical maps. Where ancient wood pastures are identified, they should receive the same consideration as other forms of ancient woodland. My other notes are with regards to the omissions of the information compiled within the reports. I don't feel that the trees were adequately assessed or accurately. My final question is I would like to know if the Planning Committee are aware of the omissions and errors that I've highlighted in my report and how they would wish to deal with this to remedy the situation. Thank you.
Next is Keith Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. I note that you've received the photographs that we've asked to be shown, obviously relevant to Flora's presentation, and I'm obviously going to refer to them myself. We also asked for a video to be shown with sound. If you haven't seen that yet, I really would urge you to listen to it and watch it. So I'm Keith Hunter. I'm a local resident, and I'm also a volunteer with Woodscape, a charity and community group that looks after the ancient woodland. The important thing on the video, which obviously we don't have the benefit of seeing today, is it gives an idea of the background noise. Faint traffic hum, but most importantly, a cacophony of birdsong. The reports that we've had are telling us that the noise won't be greatly impacted, but I can assure you there's a great difference between hearing birdsong every day and hearing the constant thud and hum and moan, motors and fans and things that this factory would obviously put in place for the nearby residents. I want to pick up on biodiversity. This is a really poor ecological impact assessment. It's woefully inadequate. And as you'll see, if you look at the photographs and the video, this is a meadow. It's full of wildflowers. It's full of insects, birds, and small mammals. It's home to a vast, diverse ecology. And I don't think adequate consideration has been given to the loss of that or the mitigation that's put in place. This meadow hasn't been cut or grazed since 2006, possibly a few years before that. And in the meantime, what has happened is Lower Fell Greve Wood has done what ancient woodlands do. It started to reclaim the meadow. So actually, the boundary line for the ancient wood could easily be 20 metres further into this meadow. It could even be up to the line of the oak trees down the middle that, as you read in Flora's report, we think have characteristics of veteran trees. So when humans stop interfering with green spaces, trees take their place. I'm really disappointed to hear that the officer's recommendation to reduce the CAVAT formula from £64,000 down to £6,000. That just really shows how little regard this authority has for the value of the trees. I noticed that you're not reducing the air quality levy fee from £94,000 down to £9,000, for example. So why reduce the amount that you value the trees? Air quality being another really important issue. Yeah. There's been a recent Friends of the Earth air quality survey which really highlights high nitrogen oxide levels along Bradley Road. We've actually placed our own monitoring equipment around all the access roads to the site. What we're going to do is try and get a picture of before and after the Broadley House occupation, just so we can show you how high the nitrogen dioxide levels are going to rise to. And with 27 more HGVs, plus all the cars and everything else that you've heard will be moving onto this site, it's a really big concern for us. Can I just make one final point? Yeah, we noticed that Victor's recommendation has at least 31 conditions or 31 categories of conditions. Maybe that's a little bit premature if you've got that many faults with the plan to decide that it's been brought too early. And also, we note that the applicant has had equipment in the machine for the last few days doing some testing and digging and whatever else. Maybe that should have been done before they made their application. Thank you.
David Ashwell next.
I did request, Chairman, that I be allowed to put drawings before members. There's 7 copies, one for each. Yeah, they're in twos. Thank you, Chair. My name is David Ashwell. I'm a resident at Grantley Place. Before I retired, I was a chartered architectural technologist with 46 years' experience in the construction industry. Chair, it is our considered opinion that this proposal will be a gross overdevelopment of the site, given the mass of the proposed buildings and ancillary services. The site take-up of buildings, car park, service areas is in excess of 80% of the usable site area, given the restrictions for the buffer zone to the ancient woodland. The total proposed floor area of 19,200 square metres is 30% above the indicative capacity of the site as stated in the authority's own local draft plan. The impression of overdevelopment is exacerbated by the size of the proposed buildings. The factory unit will take up 37% of the total site area, and its height is such that it will dwarf all buildings in the vicinity, especially the residential properties adjacent to the eastern boundary. Information submitted has only quoted the height of the factory from finished ground level adjacent to the structure, whilst ignoring the steep gradient down the site. Properties on Grantley Place will be some 6 to 7 metres below the finished floor level of the factory. Therefore, the actual height of the factory parapet will be between 19 and 22 metres above ground level at the rear of these properties. It should also be noted that the ridge height of the pitch roof line is another 4.7 metres higher than the parapet. This will create a building mass of approximately 27 metres in height. We repeatedly request the agents provide accurate site sections showing the relationship of the factory to the residential properties. These have not been forthcoming. We have therefore resorted to producing these ourselves. Copies in front of you. Chair, you will see from the section drawings the relative height between the residential properties and the factory. However, I believe the site section taken along the eastern boundary looking towards the factory shows the overwhelming extent of the factory in relation to the properties adjacent to this boundary, as indicated in dashed lines. The impact of the visual amenity is not only affected by the living adjacent to the site boundary, but all the residents of Grantley Place, Miramar and Redwood Drive. Chair, at the SPC meeting of 5th of July, members strongly indicated that mitigation measures should be included to protect residents. I would respectfully suggest that mounds and trees needed to hide such an immense structure could in themselves have a negative impact on the visual amenity of residents. Finally, Chair, Draft Policy PLP 24 states that good design should be sympathetic to the local built environment, both in scale and detail, and should provide a high standard of amenity for neighbouring occupiers. These proposals do none of that. I'm happy to answer questions or clarify anything on the drawings. Okay, thank you very much.
Opal, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Thank you, members. Residents have already raised quite a number of concerns, and this has also been picked up in Victor's report. So I just want to focus a little bit on air quality and traffic congestion. I do have some concerns around the traffic generation and the air quality management area, which is close by the site. The report states that the Bradley Bar roundabout is likely to be at full capacity by 2028, and they talk about mitigations to that capacity could be covered under a travel plan. The travel plan is dependent on encouraging staff to use a shuttle bus, and also there's some lines about car sharing as well. I do worry about the use of the shuttle bus and car sharing if the car park spaces do stand at 282. I do feel like this is quite a lot of car parking spaces, given that we're likely to have 280 staff initially, with the potential of it going on to 500 staff by 2028. So that, for me, does seem like quite a lot of car parking spaces. And I know the public health team did also raise concerns about the numbers of car parking spaces. The air quality management area is close by. It's Leeds Road and Bradley Road. Again, we're looking at the traffic plan to have some mitigation on potential air quality problems. And again, I do have concerns about that working. We know in the UK, for example, that deaths due to air pollution are at 40,000 premature deaths in the UK. So this is something that we really do need to have a think about. And it is really important. I don't think enough has been done in terms of public transport usage. The report does mention the 349 bus, and it does say there is limitations around that bus, and already we've had local residents raise concerns about the service that bus provides. It also mentions Deaton train station, which I do feel like is quite far away actually, and I don't think it's something that that employees are likely to use. In terms of the shuttle bus as well, I think the report mentioned that 40% of staff are already from Kirklees, so if the bus is coming from Brighouse, again, just concerns about how many staff will actually be picked up by that bus and what sort of pick-up points there will be around that. If I could just ask a question about the apprenticeship levels and what target we would specify around that as well. And I'll leave it to that for now. I've got another couple of minutes. Okay. Yeah, just a quick one. I think in terms of accessible car parking spaces, 2 spaces were mentioned, and again, I don't know if that's enough given the number of spaces that we were talking about. My colleague James will be raising issues around the PTFE, and I think that's something that we should really be considering as well. And I think that's it for me for now. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair and members. So there's just a couple of points I wanted to cover off. I think, obviously, local residents have got in the best position to give us some of the ideas about the local area and their amenity to them, so I won't cover those points off. But I just wanted to really look about the overall application, whether, I think one of the key things is whether this particular development is the right one for this site. Regardless of whether this is an allocation, it is a significant bit the development's been put forward. It is a factory. We are talking about a location which has residential properties, office space, a school, and woodland on all sides. So I think it is really important that we look at whether, what are the impacts of this particular development. And the one thing that I just wanted to cover off was just around any impact from emissions that there is from this site, from this factory. So I think during this process, to me, there's a little bit of confusion as to what actually is relevant in planning and what is relevant under something else. When I look through the report, it refers to policy PLP 52 that talks about a potential increase in pollution and the impact of odour. It talks about chemicals and any other forms of pollution and have they been evidenced and shown. So I think what's interesting about the report is when I look at the reference to odour, there's clearly been a significant piece of work done to determine how much odour will be emitted, what that will be like, where the hotspots will be, and there's been mitigations put in place to reduce that. But then when you look at the concerns that have been raised about emissions that can be raised from this type of use of PTFE, it seems to me that what's happened here is we've got some information from the applicant about how they view the impact and at what temperatures things become dangerous. But residents have put forward some other evidence that they've provided, and I think the report basically concludes that, well, there's nothing much to tell us that it's dangerous or that it isn't dangerous, so it's all right. And I just wonder, really, do we not, as a council, have a duty here when we're suggesting to put a factory in the middle of a residential area? We really need to think about, have we done enough to determine that this is safe? I appreciate they are factories already and they are close to residential areas, I believe. But I would just be keen to say, is there any way that we can have some sort of condition on this to say that our own environmental health team or the relevant authority needs to look at this and give us some confidence that there isn't any damage to health? So I just wanted to raise that point. The second thing I just wanted to raise was in relation to the strategic development of Bradley. It won't have kind of slipped by you, I'm sure, that there's quite a lot of development proposed in Bradley as part of the local plan process. And when you look through this report, there's kind of residents have understandably argued, well, when we're looking at the highways impact, should we not be considering over the next 15 years what the increase in cars is likely to be? And the answer to that seems to be no. But at the same time as that, the report does refer to things being developed, which I think are intrinsic to delivery of the local plans. It talks about a potential slip road round Cooper Bridge and so on, which is only going to happen if we have housing development, and kind of my understanding was to mitigate the development. So where I don't understand is, have we actually looked at this and said, obviously this was an allocation for employment, but we didn't know presumably at the time whether that was going to be 10 people, 100 people, 500 people as proposed here in the next 10 years. And we didn't necessarily know about the FGM moving in there and the 350 car parking spaces that they have. I've seen master plans for Bradley that's been put forward and sent to Cabinet. I've never at any point seen this development considered as part of that. So I'm just concerned about, does this, what impact does this then have on the proposed housing delivery in the local plan? And should we not be doing more to kind of look at this overall strategy of what's going on here and what the impact's going to be? Because I think the concern of residents is that this will come forward, further developments will come forward, and the mitigations in place on the roads will not be sufficient to deal with that, and the impacts they already feel are going to just be heightened even further. So those are my 2 points really. Can we look at something around the emissions to put something conditioning there in place to make sure that's fully dealt with, and just for your benefit to consider, have we thought strategically about the whole site and the development as part of the local plan as well? Thank you.
Members may remember the Kirklees economic strategy, which was launched a year or two ago, I think it was. But then there was a really strong health element in that economic strategy. It was almost like an economic and health strategy. It was it very much recognised that if we were going to develop the economy, we also needed to consider health at the same time. And that's, if you like, one of the reasons why I think that this application really ought to be turned down. And we've got enough information here that's being given to actually turn the application down. I think the tree issue, the veteran tree issue, cannot be ignored. I am deeply worried that perhaps those trees have not been correctly recognised, and we need to ensure that they are or are not veteran trees, and I think that's crucial to this application, and that alone could be the basis for which to turn them down. The other aspect is the air quality management area that we've had down Leeds Road, and the area is, of course, very vulnerable there to changes in air quality. This is going to have a huge impact in terms of transport. There's been an attempt to reduce the amount of cars here. There is the shuttle bus. Do we really believe the shuttle bus is going to be there in a year or two's time? I'm really concerned about that. And those amount of cars actually coming in and out of that site, and the NOx emissions that are going to come from it are a huge problem. There's also a comment made about heritage assets and about heritage assets not being affected. Well, those trees within the site are heritage assets, I would argue, in many ways, and that the peer review that's been done here by a professional arboriculturalist cannot be ignored. You know, if we actually pass this application and ignore the evidence that's been put before us, it's a crime to the environment in that area. But also, we could have made a miscalculation regarding the reasons that we should have to turn it down. So I'll leave it at that. Please turn down the application.
Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Hudson. I am Managing Director of Airflexos. I have worked for the company since 1990, starting as an extrusion operator and working my way up to my current position. Up until November 2016, Airflex was a privately owned company before being purchased by Watson Barlow. We currently operate out of 4 sites in Calderdale and one which we occupied this month in Kirklees. We are operating inefficiently and experiencing both office and production space limitations, and we are desperately in need of expansion in order to meet our business goals. We are seeing year-on-year expansion of sales growth of over 20%, and 80% of all these goods are being exported. We have been looking for a site for the past 3 years that can meet our requirements in terms of size, location, good transport links, and outside of the flood zone risk. We were flooded in Boxing Day 2015 at one of our Brighouse sites. This site was brought to our attention by Kirklees. It has been allocated and marketed for employment uses for over a decade. The new local plan proposing more flexible employment uses means the proposed location of our business therefore meets both local planning policy and Airflex's requirements. Airflex developed their own unique manufacturing processes and products with a high number of skilled and highly skilled workers. We already work closely with schools and colleges. Currently, we have 12 apprentices and plans to employ a further 3 later this year. We have recently tied up with Nicola Barnes at Kirklees College and are currently reviewing candidates from her. We are also committed to training up our own staff with various training courses across the different job specifications at Airflex. We are looking to grow the business, and over the next 10 years are aiming to increase the workforce to around 500 people. With the commitments in the Section 106 to seek to employ local people, there is a clear opportunity for local people in Kirklees to be employed and trained up by us. The relocation of this business to Kirklees is a huge win for Kirklees. For example, we contribute a substantial amount of money to local suppliers, as shown in the committee report. Relocating the business to Kirklees is likely to increase the supply chain in that borough. In terms of highways, we are committed to providing the shuttle bus to transport up to 100 employees. It should also be noted that due to our staff working 8 a.m. or earlier, the impact on the local network is zero during the AM peak hours, as our staff will already have started their shift. We are also committed to providing cycle storage and electric cycle and vehicle hookups. Technically, the application has been deemed acceptable by the local planning authority, and we agree that subject to the signing of the Section 106 agreement, the planning application should be approved. My team and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair, through you, the question regarding whether or not the tree officer has visited the site, I believe he has. I believe it was at pre-application stage, possibly again during application stage, but he's certainly familiar with the trees on the site.
Is there any tree preservation on any of the trees that are actually there already?
Through you, Chair, no, there are not.
No, it's a clear site, respectable. Apart from these vintage trees it's actually there.
Those trees exist on site. It's not a clear site, but they're not considered to be veteran trees by the council's tree officer.
So that's a material point. They're not considered to be veteran trees.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. The other point is, and this was raised by a couple of people, and we have been supplied with section drawings. Why would we not ask for section drawings?
Sorry,
why did
Councillor,
we not ask for sectional drawings which show the relationship between the houses and the loss of amenity?
We did ask for sectional drawings, and 2 additional sections were submitted by the applicant. The residents have said that those don't show what sections were requested.
The relationship.
I can scroll to them. Actually, we do have them on the presentation. So these sections were submitted by the applicant, and the section lines, it's probably quite difficult for you to see, but you can see the section lines AA and BB through the site. The section BB passes through 30 Grantley Place. I don't know if you can see there. Section AA passes through 19 Miramar. If I scroll up to section AA, this is the applicant's illustration of the relationship between the proposed B2, B8 building and...
That doesn't reflect on the drawings that's been supplied.
The problem is the sections that have just been circulated today don't show exactly the same section line. Right. So you'll see on the drawings that have been circulated today, they go through 39 Grantley Place, which is slightly different to what's shown in these sections.
And that's taken in the topography of the gradient of the land as well, then?
Yes. Yeah.
And I just ask you a bit, it's in the report, but I think this needs to be made aware of this. Is it 51 metres is the closest property?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. And say at that particular point, what is how much of that, the top of that ridge can you see of the proposed building then?
Well, that nearest corner of the building is 14 metres in height.
Right.
So There isn't a section that precisely runs along through that corner to the nearest property. Members would have to refer to that section. Sorry, which, beg your pardon, just bear with me. Yeah, section B goes through number 30. So that's the closest to that immediate relationship that's been submitted.
The expectation is it will be covered by the buffer and the vegetation that's planted, the trees that's planted and everything. Is that correct?
Yeah, our officer's view is that planting is adequate to provide screening there.
I'm going to leave it there because I'm sure other people want to speak, but I have got a couple of other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start off with a question, please? And this is a question about the local plan hearings. I wonder what the inspector at the recent hearings thought about the allocation of this site, which in the new local plan is for any kind of B use, not just B1. Did the inspector express any opinion as to whether this was a good thing or a bad thing, or was it neutral?
Through you, Chair, the local plan inspector made no comment on this site allocation. None.
Sorry.
It's just worth adding that the main modifications that the council is currently consulting on don't require any modifications to this allocation. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. That does. Sorry, that does answer the point that I was trying to make. The other question I was going to ask was, and I do remember something about traffic generation from the position statement hearing. And we were, I think, given information about the possible traffic generation from a B1 use of this site, in other words, for office-type accommodation, and the traffic generation estimated for this use. Do you still have that information through you, Chair?
Through you, Chair, Steve Sampson, Highways Development Management. I don't have that information in front of me, but I can assure you that a B1 use is a greater traffic generator than a B2, B8 use. Although the makeup of the B8, there are quite a few HGVs associated with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a question about the original and I hope you might be able to answer this, the original outright planning permission and planning permission that was given to the whole site, just in respect to trees and any other ecological issues that may have arisen at that time. I mean, obviously, trees have grown a bit in that those intervening years, but not significantly. So were they an issue for any of the sites, of the whole of the business park, or even this particular bit back in 2000 and 2003?
Apologies. Through you, Chair, Councillor Patterson. I'm sorry, that's before my time. I didn't deal with that application. I don't know.
Thanks, Chair. What I would like to ask the question is, when was this site set aside for industrial land? How long ago is that? And if it was a long time ago, why were not the residential properties put in position to know that it was going to be industrial, rather than suddenly come up now? Because I've been bombarded with emails all telling me the same story. So I would like to know, how long have we known it was an industrial site, and why has it been laid fallow for so long? Has nobody been interested in doing anything with it? Suddenly, and these people have lived there a long time, obviously, and I wouldn't like to think I was going to get that, but at the end of the day, if it's down for industrial, then it's down for industrial, and I would like to know how long, and why people were never informed that it was industrial, because I think if I'd have been buying a house down there and known that was at some point in time something was going to be built there, probably as large as this, then I would certainly have looked somewhere else to buy my property. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. The site has been allocated for B1 use only since the UDP was adopted in 1999. The proposal to change or expand that allocation to all the B uses, i.e. B1, B2, B8, in the local plan was first published at the end of 2015. That was a result of, well, that change was proposed to reflect the requirements of the MPPF, which requires councils to be more flexible on employment land allocations. Residents have been consulted on the proposed reallocation. Details of that consultation are set out in the committee report. I appreciate that during that consultation there wasn't obviously this scheme illustrated and before those residents, but I would make the point again that changing the allocation of the site doesn't mean that all the relevant issues applicable to this application or the amenity impacts, highways impacts, etc. suddenly fall away just because a new allocation is proposed. Those still do need to be considered, and this is the forum where those concerns are to be considered by the council as local planning authority. My understanding as to why the site has sat vacant for so long is because it was allocated for B1 use, and interest in those uses in this location dried up. You'll be aware that this isn't the only vacant site in Bradley Business Park, and that's, I understand, the reason why it hasn't been developed.
Thank you, Chair. My question is a bit round the air quality and odours part of it. Somebody said that this company's got 4 sites already in Calderdale, and I appreciate that this site will probably be a lot bigger than them 4 small sites in Calderdale. But have they had any, I don't know, in Calderdale, or do we know if they've had any problems with the odours or that sort of thing? Have we any information on that at all?
Through you, Chair, the applicants have advised us that they do appoint or retain independent monitoring consultants to come to their sites and carry out testing of emissions coming from their 4 existing sites, and to make sure that those emissions are within regulatory requirements, which are all subject to non-planning legislation controls. In terms of noise, personally I haven't been to those sites, but the applicants have submitted information about noise levels at those existing sites. That's in the noise report that the applicants have submitted. They did also give us recently details of a noise complaint submitted to Calderdale Council, I believe, by nearby residents, and after some investigation it was established that the noise was not in fact coming from a Flex Hoses plant. They do maintain that they are good neighbours to the residential occupants that live near their existing 4 sites, and they have pointed out that residents of Calderdale actually live closer to those 4 sites than the residents of Miramar and Grantley Place would live to this proposed development.
Can I just, do you mind if I just expand on that? Because in 10.141, it actually tells you there about the possible production of PFCs and the emergency sort of temperature gauges and at which these PFCs could be actually produced. And I think Councillor Bellamy actually raised a good point there, in the fact that have they ever exceeded that temperature, whereas these PFCs could possibly have been emitted?
Through you, Chair, I'm afraid I don't have that information. The applicants are here. Perhaps they could answer that question if members agree.
Thank you. Can I just go on to a couple other things now? Obviously, I think when we talk about consultation, I think it's unfair that people, the community at large, are expected to totally understand what's possibly could go there and couldn't go there. But at the end of the day, there is always that possibility that this could have been changed. And we have got this application before us, and that's what we've got to look at today. And I think that's fair to say. And we've got to actually accept whether this is a loss of amenity or not. There is various other issues that's been raised today, and I think a lot of them have been answered by our planning officer. But one of the ones that I can't understand, that I really can't understand, is that, and you know, when we start talking about community involvement, is about the very fact that the reduction in this contributions down from possible 64,000 down to 6,000 for the loss of these trees, and for the life of me, I can't understand where we said, well, you know, there's a scheme as big as this, and it can't afford that £64,000. Can you just answer me that, Victor, please?
Through you, Chair. That was based on the advice of the arboricultural officer, who did an initial caveat value calculation, but then advised that that was unreasonable and disproportionate, given, one, the condition of the trees on site, and two, the contribution they make to public amenity value, which is a significant factor in when assessing the value of trees.
That's all subjective, isn't it? It's the subjective approach, is that? Sorry, I apologise. It is extremely subjective, and if there's you talk about a specific equation as to how this is done, for us to then unilaterally just say, well, right, we'll just reduce that down to £6,000. I think it doesn't. I think it does send the wrong message to that community. I have to say this, that I'm in quite full support of this application, but I also want to be fair with the communities that we're actually dealing with, and I do think that is, you know, unfair, and it has been a unilateral thing that we've accepted here. Because I think in general, the application itself is attractive to Kirklees because it's good economically. We have put all these caveats in as far as the transport and all these other things, as long as actually these are going to be abided to, and you know, we need to a certain amount of ensuring that these are going to be done. So, you know, we can vote on that in the future. But what I want to say is, let's try and be fair with these communities, because every question that I've asked today, I think, relates back to some of the comments that's been made to us, that I've been trying to, you know, the silliest questions are the ones that you don't ask, aren't they? And I've been trying to relate them questions, and I think we've had some good answers today from the officers to actually try to mitigate the reasons for accepting this actual application. But the one thing that does stick in my craw is the fact that we've, as I say, unilaterally just accepted £6,000. Now, I think we should go back on that and ask for more money, to be quite honest with you.
Firstly, I very strongly agree with Councillor Kane's comments. I cannot understand either why there has been this very substantial reduction in potential contributions, and I would like that to be looked at again. In relation to air quality issues related to transport for people to and from the factory in heavy goods vehicles, I accept the point made by Councillor Upral that the railway station at Deaton, it's very unlikely that people are going to use that. So looking at the alternative in terms of bus transport, has anything been done to look at the potential for improving bus services in that area? I think Councillor Homewood also makes a very good point that you've got to look at this in relation to the fact that there's a tremendous amount of housing development taking place in that area as well. So just a question really, have we been in a position to enter into any negotiations to look at bus routes in that area?
Through you, Chair. Through the wider local plan allocations and such, and obviously we don't know the outcome of which sites and such, but there got to be some development in the area, around the areas. There has been an allocation from the West Yorkshire Transport Fund of circa 78 million, and that is for improvements to the local network on the A641 from Calderdale to Kirklees, to Huddersfield, and the Cooper Bridge roundabout, the Bradley Road roundabout, and the Bradley Bar roundabout, and the Bradley Road Leeds junction. These improvements won't be just for, people say for capacity, but it's for efficiencies. So it's to keep the traffic moving, but it won't be just for the car, it will be for the cyclist, pedestrian and public transport. On the hierarchy, it will be public transport first, cyclists, pedestrians and then traffic. Back to the air quality, it's about keeping the traffic moving to improve that air quality, providing choices other than using the car, and obviously car sharing and the shuttle bus. You've mentioned the train station. There's no reason why the shuttle bus cannot go down to the train station as part of the travel plan to pick up passengers. And we're talking now at this point where the employees' majority are in Calderdale. As time goes on, and that may change, and maybe more local. Thank you, Chair.
I think we should. But can I just mention one other thing? And this morning, because I wasn't at the last meeting, this morning I went and had a personal look around that business park to have a look, to see the actual application and the joining businesses on there. And I have to say, it's pretty bad down there. There's, you know, the old PCT building. There's nobody in there now. You know, so what are we going to do here? We're going to leave this land to go back to rack and ruin. You know, this what it was put in is it 1998 as a business park. Surely we want these business parks to be profitable, and you know, you've got a business here that's going to possibly provide 500 jobs for the people of Kirklees, mostly for the people of Huddersfield. I know that Steve mentioned just now. A lot of them are coming from Calderdale at this moment in time, but that would naturally just move on a little bit, I'm pretty sure. We can't just leave these pieces of land. It's unfair, because if you don't have them here, you'll have them somewhere else. And we've already made that decision that these are business parks. I think that in actual fact, Chair, if you want me to move it, I will move the acceptance of this with the caveat that we increase that money for the trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will formally, well, sorry, you've already done that, but what I was going to say was I fully support what Councillor Kane was saying about the money for trees, because it does send the wrong message that we don't value the green environment on this site. And let's face it, if we had an application for B1 use on this site, we would still be having to do something about the existing vegetation there to fit in with any potential development. As it is, we've got a single use which one could interpret as being something of a coup for Kirklees, and I think it, in terms of providing employment, not immediately, but as Mr. Sampson says, over time, it will become part of the Kirklees employment scenery, if you like. But I think we need to make an amendment to the recommendation that we're given about the sum of money that's mentioned there. I wouldn't like to say what sum of money. if we can't work that out at the moment, we probably have to delegate this to officers to approve, to agree a suitable sum, which is more than 6,000. And I think that's important. The other point I was going to make was in relation to bus services. There have been applications in Kirklees, one in particular which I remember from a long time ago, Elliott's Brickworks in Almondbury, where a new bus service was put through that site. Now, you probably can't do that here very easily, but I think that in consultation with Metro, we need to look at whether it is feasible or necessary to run a bus service that caters for this business park. It may turn out that we don't need to do that, but I certainly think that some consultation is necessary so that there is adequate, maybe even more than adequate bus services along Bradley Road, particularly bearing in mind there's intended to be a lot more development along there, so that we have a reasonably high frequency bus service that goes along Bradley Road, and I mean every 10 minutes. I mean, maybe we can put that in the recommendation, but that's what I think.
Can I just say, in terms of the contribution with regard to the tree planting, that caveat's noted, but provided, of course, that can be justified in terms of, because that's a figure which has been worked out by our professional arboriculturists, so it may be justifiable in terms of more mature trees, which are more expensive, so that the trees that give the buffer zone, it's faster, or more trees in locations which weren't identified before. But I'm sure we'll be able to do that. Well, they'll delegate it to officers, but I'm just saying it can't just be upped automatically.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Tom. It's just about traffic and traffic generation. Did I hear correctly that this place works on shift work? It's not sort of set peak times. So depending on when the shifts start and the shifts finish, I would have thought that the traffic generation wouldn't specifically be peak times. Then if you could make them shifts start before peak time, finish in between peak times, and then after peak times, etc. I was just thinking that may help if we could put something in. That may help with traffic generation as well.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to what everybody's had to say about this particular plan, and I did ask the question, why has nothing been done with it in the last 20 years? I haven't had a proper answer, but I suppose it's irrelevant now. The thing is, if this is going to go ahead, I would suggest that officers have a lot to do with the sorting out of this, listening to what the people have said and working with the people as well as with the owner to get it right. I did suggest this before. You need to get it right. You need to get it in such a way that it isn't going to interfere with the lives of these people that live around there. If they have a shuttle bus, that's a good idea, but if they do have a shuttle bus, we don't want it to pack in after 3 weeks and everybody helps themselves, because this is what happens. We all know that. We get promises. If we pass things, we get promises, and half of those promises fall flat. Well, we don't want that. I think officers should be in charge of what's going to happen now and do the best they can for the people that live down there and for the factory itself. It is jobs. I'm told that end of another 10 years, probably 500 jobs. You can't afford to turn jobs down nowadays because, you know, we need jobs. But the thing is that I've never had the answer is, why has it been lying fallow for 20 years and nobody's done anything about advertising it, pre-advertising it? There should have been a factory in there 20 years ago, for goodness sake, earning money for Kirklees. And look at it now, it's just a wilderness. You know, it's just silly work, really. But at the end of the day, I would say, I would get what what Paul's had to say, what everybody's had to say. We're all in agreement that the people down there need looking after and make sure that they are living somewhere where they want to live and they're not going to be upset and having to move because of noise, smells, whatever. All those have got to be addressed. And I think it's down to officers now, balls in your court, if we do pass it this afternoon, to address all these things. Thank you.
Any more? Right. It's being moved by Councillor Kane, seconded by Councillor Walker. Those in favour of the application, please show. Unanimous.
Approved.
Next, we'll move on to page 57. And this is a recurring application that's back with us again. Els Eaton. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that the application came to Strategic Committee on the 2nd of August, where members deferred the application to allow the applicant a further opportunity to submit specific details of a construction management plan. As you'll recall, the application itself relates to the erection of 5 dwellings. A document has been received from the applicant which reiterates their stance that a full plan cannot be finalised until a developer is appointed, who would then be able to identify suppliers, timescales, responsible people and carry out consultation. The submitted plan is limited by these factors and the applicant considers that any subsequent approval will require a full construction management plan. The applicant has confirmed their view that construction access off Wakefield Road would not be possible due to the change in levels, and if a crane was used, this would have to unload everything from Wakefield Road, which they consider would be dangerous and would not be financially viable. As set out within paragraph 10.23 of the report, from a highways perspective, officers consider that any unresolved matters can be dealt with by condition, and such a condition could specify the requirement for the sole construction access to be taken from Wakefield Road with no construction access from Park View. This would be in accordance with the request of the Strategic Planning Committee. Nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. We are having difficulty in providing the information that you want. We're trying to be honest in that and come forward to you with a straight opinion, if you like. Things like how many times will deliveries arrive on site are generally determined between a meeting between the contractors who are going to build the buildings and perhaps the owner at the time. That's because, for example, the contractor may only have 2 people working on site at once over a long period, or it may be 20 people over a very short period. It's very, obviously, you cannot actually predict which person, which company will be taking on the business of actually building these properties. We are also trying to give you our best opinion on what you actually want, which is all traffic coming off Wakefield Road. Our best opinion is that we do not think that that could actually happen. And the reasons behind that are that a ramp down on those levels isn't physically possible, and a crane on the top level, first of all, our architect doesn't think that will be safe unloading off Wakefield Road, but it's also unviable from an economic point of view. Those things are very expensive to hire. I know members mentioned one in Slathwaite last time round.
I know the developer who's involved there. He owns that crane. He has it for his own purposes. He's a disabled person and he uses the crane for his own ease kind of thing. So it is an exception. But you will notice that most of my sort of conversation is that we think that this will happen. We think that this will happen. That's because the information that you want and need to satisfy your concerns can only be provided at a later stage in the development process. That is when the contractors are appointed, and a construction traffic management plan could then be fully formulated for you and submitted as part of a condition. That is the normal process that happens on planning applications, and I point to many cases in the middle of London where we've done lots of research, and I've looked around all the London authorities. They all have their own templates on how to do this process because they have their probably more severe difficulties than we have up here. And it's done via condition. So, Chair, what I'm asking your members to do is consider today approving the application, subject to a condition that a full construction traffic management plan is submitted to you as the local planning authority. If the members want that in front of them, you put that in front, request to your officers to bring it back to you for full consideration. Our opinion, in all honesty, is that what you won't get is all traffic management off Wakefield Road. That's our opinion. I have to say that because we're trying to have a dialogue with you rather than just say, yeah, we'll provide you with a crane, because we don't think that will happen, Chair and members. So, thank you.
Now then, let me tell you something. I've actually done your job for you. I've done your job for you as well. I've been down to see them people down there. And I told them what we all said here, how concerned we were about what was possibly going to happen. And they were extremely concerned and very, 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 very thankful for what we'd said. And they are accepting of what you're saying. They are accepting. So what I would say to you, make it conditional, but make it condition that them people are fully informed and accept your the traffic management plan that's been put before them. They've got to accept that. They consider it, they don't want them to be going down there, but they're not silly. They are not silly. And the main person that's been involved in this, she said to me, she says, well, Councillor Kane, I want to thank you for what you've done. And I know it's been back a couple of times. She says, but, you know, we're accepting the inevitable. But we want to have some element of control over it. And that is all I'm asking, because I'm their elected member. That's all I'm asking of this planning committee. So they have got to accept the traffic management plan. And I don't think it needs to come back to us. You know, they've got to be accepting of it. So with that, I would move it with that actual condition. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's clear to us. What I'd ask is the applicant, when they submit the traffic management plan, send in correspondence to show that they've engaged with residents and residents know what they're saying before they supply, and then we can make a decision as opposed to the local authority consulting residents on the traffic management plan. The other way around. Yeah.
At the last meeting, I raised a slightly different issue, which I think is probably referred to in the first bullet point of 1.3, which is about the footway around the site. And the point I raised was that, looking at it, there appeared to be a problem, or a potential problem, for anyone who was disabled using a wheelchair. And I asked at the time if, whilst this work was taking place, we could carry out improvements to the footway to make it more accessible. Has anything happened? Has there been any further consideration of that?
For a wheelchair, I don't believe so. I know where I believe you mean where the carriageway is ramped up. Yeah. If that's something you want addressing by condition, that's reasonable, I would have said. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, well, if I can come back on that, while we were on site in the bus, there was actually somebody trying to get down the road, and they had to go right down the middle of the road because they couldn't use the footway, and I just felt that this would be an opportunity to do something about that, both for the potential residents of the new development and other people who are using that way. Yeah.
For a wheelchair, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about the footpath that crosses the carriageway. There's a where it comes from carriageway to shared surface, it's disjointed between the footpath connections, so it's actually the ramped area that's in line with the footpath crossing the carriageway. So my understanding is you'd like that moving further along, so it's on the shared area. So, if you can zoom in, where your cursor is now. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, where the hard margin is at that point.
Just to carry on from Paul, if there is a traffic management, which there needs to be, can I suggest that if there is any alteration to that management on any day, that the residents are informed on that day what is going to happen or not happen? Can we make a note of that and please arrange for that? Okay.
I'm just mentioning it because I'm doing a lot of work in my own ward at the moment with Councillor Bellarmine. We're looking at kind of retrofitting these kind of things. And obviously, when you're doing work like this, if you really consider it properly and make sure you do it properly first time, you don't have to go back and spend money again. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just clarify with members with regard to the proposed condition, if we're looking at a condition for a full construction management plan, what officers will propose is that the requirement for those specific details relates to the bullet points set out within paragraph 1.3 and then later on in the report. But in addition to that, at the last meeting, members raised their concern about wanting the construction access only from Wakefield Road. And as I said in my presentation, officers consider that could be included because whilst the applicant doesn't feel it would work, officers don't consider it would be impossible. So can I just get some clarification on what you'd be wanting?
So we'll take that out, we'll try, but if they need to access it from Wakefield, from the side road, and they've notified residents and residents know, then in that instance, that would be an acceptable construction management plan. Is that clear? Yeah, thank you.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Bellamy, seconded by Councillor Pinner. Those in favour, please show.
Move up now to page 7.
Good afternoon, members, committee. I'm the case officer for the next application, Matthew Woodward. So the proposal constitutes a full application for residential development. Amended plans have recently been received and the proposal now constitutes 84 dwellings. I think the report refers to 87, but as I say, there has been some very recent amendments to the scheme. The latest amended plans were received very recently, and the implications of these amendments are covered in the update at the end of the committee report. The application is recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the officer report. The site covers an area of approximately 3.3 hectares. It's a relatively large plot of land situated between Lady Anne Road to the east and Primrose Hill to the west. The site's an irregular shape. The northern boundary is marked by a 1 metre high wooden fence and vegetation. On the western boundary, there are the rear gardens and fences associated with terraced houses on Primrose Hill. There is a railway line further beyond Primrose Hill, which runs to the station at Batley. Properties facing the site on Lady Anne Road are from the late 19th, early 20th century. They are generally stone terrace dwellings, and it's the same type of architecture and same housing types along Primrose Hill. So the site's allocated for housing in the unitary development plan, and it's also a housing allocation in the emerging local plan. The site is a greenfield site. It's reasonably located to a number of services and other facilities and reasonably close to the railway station. In conclusion, it is an accessible location, hence it is a housing proposal, a housing allocation in the local plan. In terms of the layout that you see on the first slide, this has been largely dictated by a number of constraints. The main constraints are associated with the flood risk or the flood zone on the western boundary or the eastern portion of the site. This is associated with Howley Brook, which runs along the bottom part of the site. And therefore, the layout's been designed so as to try and avoid any development within this flood zone. In addition, Howley Brook is considered to be an important area for potential water voles. This has been verified by the Council's ecologist and West Yorkshire Ecology, who consider that this is likely to represent one of only 2 populations of water voles in Kirklees. Now, the applicant has submitted a survey with the application, which does give some information concerning water voles in this location, but the Council's biodiversity officer considers that this report is lacking. It lacks a full detailed survey of the potential for water voles in Howley Brook, and therefore there is an objection from the Council's ecologist, and that has been borne out by one of the reasons for refusal in the officer recommendation. In addition, because of the flood risk, there is an element of risk that the flooded area of land could potentially harm water voles by effectively trapping them within this part of the site, because water voles do need a dry area or a dry refuge. Now, this could potentially be designed out, and the applicant has submitted some information concerning some form of mitigation in order to protect and enhance watervole populations, but it is lacking a detailed survey of watervoles in the area. So moving on quickly to the design, I'm sure you've noticed from the site visit this morning that the site is quite sloping and it's very open, but the characteristic of the area comprises mainly stone-built terraced units which have a strong rhythm and a very strong presence on Lady Anne Road. The properties on Primrose Hill are very similar in terms of architectural style and from the same era. And it's considered particularly important that this proposed development relates well to the existing architecture and character of the surrounding area. Now, it's acknowledged that further down Lady Anne Road there is a red brick former mill complex, and it's fronted by a large red brick building. But generally speaking, stone and Victorian terraced units are the main housing type surrounding the site. So to address the officer's concerns, as I've said, the scheme has been designed with a buffer zone at the bottom of the site, fronting Lady Anne Road, and a further area of potential habitat protection for water voles. So the housing development is set back from Lady Anne Road from approximately 23 metres, and that increases slightly, as you see from the houses, which are set further back. Now, the applicant produced a sketch drawing to show the intended view or architectural style of the development and scale and massing. And you'll see here that this is a proposed access, and it was intended that the scheme reflect in scale the scale of existing properties on Lady Anne Road. However, when officers have assessed the scheme in detail, it's clear that there are significant changes in terms of the style of the development in comparison with the existing urban grain. That is to say that the properties, the house types are very different, and the house types are much larger than the existing houses in the area. So just to give you a very quick flavour of how the scheme would appear from Lady Anne Road, this shows the street scene. The top line there is the street scene from Lady Anne Road. The blue line you can see there is a site access. You'll see that the first houses coming into the site are mainly 2 stories, rising to 3 stories further on Lady Anne Road, and then 3 stories set further back. It's quite difficult to tell from that drawing, so what I intend to do very, very quickly is just take you quickly through some of the house types along the frontage. So plots numbers 78 to 84 would front Lady Anne Road, and as you come into the site, they will be the houses on the right-hand side, and I'll just quickly show you what these properties would look like. So this is one of the house types, and I'll quickly just run through them. Again, that's one of the other house types along that short stretch of houses. And what I also intend to do, again very quickly, is just, sorry about skipping between slides, just show you these properties along the frontage. So these are the houses that would be closest to Lady Anne Road. So I'll just have to quickly skip through to find the house types. So this is the type of house that would be on the frontage, immediately adjacent to site entrance. Officers have got concerns about the design of this housing unit because of its prominent appearance within the street. It's 4 garages at ground floor level. Similarly, the one next door would be 3 garages at ground floor level. And then as you move further on the street, further on Lady Anne Road, you would have 3-storey elements facing the rear so facing Lady Anne Road. Again, concerns about the scale. Now, the applicant has provided some more detail in terms of the materials, and you will note from the update that an art stone product is proposed, details to be fully confirmed, but at the same time you will note that policy BE11 of the Unitary Development Plan reinforces that building materials should be natural stone where natural stone is used as a predominant material in the locality. So in this case it is considered that a natural stone product should be used, particularly on those properties facing Lady Anne Road. So that the applicant doesn't comply with that the application does not comply with that policy. In terms of the layout, just a bit further elaboration on the layout. There are concerns from Highways regarding the internal layout and the tight nature of this first turn into the site. Concerns about getting regular vehicles, cars around that bend, but particularly the larger vehicles such as refuse wagons. The spine road itself's another added ingredient in terms of why we don't consider this would be a well-designed scheme. It's a very linear road with little to break it up. Overall, it's not considered that the use of the house types or the design and layout of the scheme represents a good streetscape. And overall, it's considered that the scheme lacks cohesion. In terms of trees, there are, as you saw from the site visit, I've got a photograph shortly, there are 4 trees that are protected on the site. The latest amended plan shows that the retaining wall, which runs in order to divide these rear gardens, would route around the trees. Now, the tree officer has some concerns. Firstly, that practically would still affect the root protection area of the trees. But secondly, that the trees themselves, with them being so large, would cause significant overshadowing of some of these gardens. And therefore, there would be some significant pressure in future for those trees to be pruned or even lost altogether. And I've got a photograph of the trees in case you didn't make the site visit. So those are the trees within the centre of the site. In terms of other matters, you'll see from the report that the impact on residential amenity, there has been a number of objections from local residents on Primrose Hill who considered that the development would be too close to their properties and affect their amenity and outlook. The submitted site sections indicate that this development would be acceptable in terms of the impact on the nearest residential properties. The development's far enough away from the existing properties on Primrose Hill, and as you can see from these sections, particularly the top one there, it is set that the properties at the top of the site will be set into the site, so effectively they would appear as 2-storey properties from those existing units on Primrose Hill, so there are no concerns in that respect. So overall, whilst this is a housing allocation and housing is in principle acceptable on this site, there are significant concerns with the overbearing impact and impact on the character and appearance of the area, hence reason for refusal 1. There are additional concerns regarding the potential impact of the scheme on water voles, which are a species of principal importance, and overall there's insufficient information concerning how the development might affect this important species, and that results in reason for refusal number 2. The other reasons for refusal concern the potential impact on the protected trees. There is a lack of revised flood risk information. You'll see the drainage officer is generally satisfied with the principle of positioning housing outside the flood zone, but it's not reinforced by a revised flood risk assessment. The West Yorkshire Archaeology have requested some archaeological information, and that information has not been forthcoming, so that represents a reason for refusal. And you'll see from the update that the Highways Development Management have raised concerns in terms of the transport assessment not having considered the impact on some of the local junctions and not having considered the potential impact of cars and driveways within the development scheme itself. And that results in another reason for refusal. And finally, the impact on infrastructure has not been addressed through the submission of a draft Section 106 agreement. And that concludes, Chair.
One speaker, which is Simon Lum.
Is it okay? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm the architect, work for the architects that developed this scheme on behalf of the developer. And I just want to read a sort of brief statement that I think covers some of the areas that have been discussed. The developer Noble Homes has been involved with planning applications for new housing developments in excess of 30 years. And in his opinion, Laydown Road is one of the most challenging sites he's been involved in due to a number of factors. The main one being the topography. It is a sloping site. It is constrained by the beck at the bottom. And in some places it's up to 1 in 6, so it's very steep. And that's reflected in the choice of house types that we've used, which I'll come on to. We've tried to design the scheme to work with existing topography. The access road climbs up the site from its point on Laydown Road and tries to follow the topography so that we don't end up with very steep sections of road. It's no more than 1 in 15 anywhere on the site. And as you get round to the top, the road is forced to be fairly linear because there isn't really anywhere to put any deviation in the road because we're constrained with separation distances to Primrose Hill, separation distances between the properties on the road itself, and also the wetland and the beck at the bottom. So we sort of have to put the road where it is, and that determined a lot of the layout. What we have tried to do is that there's a mixture of 22 different house types, ranging from one-bedroom flats, which are in the small units at the bottom of the site, which are the ones that have the garages at the back. That's the reason you have garages there, because there's a flat above. Right up to 5-bedroom family homes in 2- and 3-storey split-level configurations that give a varied street scene, and there is some rhythm to the street scene. And it's designed to work with that topography. So the road does actually flow on the straight section. So it's not a flat road, it does follow the contours as they currently are. And that was done deliberately so we were minimising... sorry, okay, speed up. The plots are basically either cut into the hill, so 3-storey at the beginning, 2-storey at the back, or coming down the hill, 2-storey at the back, 3-storey at the beginning, at the front. With regards to the Vole area, we have protected the Vole zone. We've created a second watercourse that creates an island. The idea being to provide improved habitat, which we discussed at a planning meeting, and protect them from predation from domestic cats. Do I have one more second? The key thing was the interaction between Laydown Road, and that is why we've effectively created a series of houses that have 2 frontages, because ordinarily you would be looking at the back of houses which access the main road. We feel that we've been sympathetic with the choice of materials and house types, and would ask you to approve the application. However, if the committee are not in a position to approve today, we'd ask that you defer decision so that we can have further conversations with the planners and iron out these details with highways and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I think I tend to agree with the officers on this. But as I said on the bus, I think we are looking at overdevelopment of this site. I think looking at the plan that we've got before us, I think this linear road that runs parallel with Primrose Hill is probably the only way of developing this site, because that then gets away from having roads that are going up the hill, and I think that is not a good idea. I suspect that given those trees as well, we ought to remove the lower rows of houses altogether. Now, if this results in non-viability, I think we'd have to face that if it happened. I think it's worth pointing out that both Primrose Hill, or Primrose Hill mostly, there are some mixed houses at the top end which aren't necessarily stone, and certainly Lady Anne Road, they're both natural stone, albeit that the houses on Primrose Hill are showing their backs to this site, not their front, so it's not their principal elevation. I applaud all the other things that are being done, particularly to deal with the water vole habitat, because I think, bearing in mind some of the comments that were made to the previous, not the previous application, the one before that, about the natural environment, I think we have got to do as much as we can to look after it. But I don't think this is as it's laid out. I don't think this is the right way to do this. And if it means deferring it, then I would move that in the hope that we can come to an agreement about how we can go forward on this site without the overdevelopment that I think there is on here, and also that it fits in with the two existing roads.
I think, notwithstanding a lot of the comments that the reasons that Matthew gave for refusing this application, I think Councillor Pilling just touched upon something there that were about intensification, and I've got to be fair to the applicant, and it's really, I think you attacked him for it being bad design. It's bad design by the very fact that it's intensification, and you can only get on what you know. If they intend to intensify this, you're always going to have bad design. So I don't think we can do anything about it, and deferring it is not going to do anything at all, because I don't think you can get out of that. Because if it's not going to reduce, and I know you mentioned, Andrew, about reducing them possible 4 or maybe 5 properties at the bottom. How far do you go before it becomes just a totally new application? I was down there this morning. I went intentionally myself to have a look, and it isn't, the topography of that site isn't great, but it's not rocket science to actually get an application that's workable down there. I think the general feeling of stack 'em high and build 'em cheap is an issue, whereas they try to increase the amount of profit that they get out of these. They don't want to give anything back to the local authority. They want to maximise what they can get out of it. And it doesn't, we've asked for affordables, we've asked for all the other things, and that information is not forthcoming. And I just think that, I'd like to know how many times we've asked them for it, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer. We've asked for them many a time, and it's just holding back on information. So I certainly wouldn't be supporting the deferral. I'd support a wholesale refusal of this application, and tell them to start again, because it's just, that linear road, it looks awful. It looks like going back into the 1930s, and we're in a situation where we can design out most of these problems. And far be it from me to say this, that if it does affect the viability, we should look at the viability, but we should be looking at good design, because these are for the people to live in. And I'm sorry, you're building something there that could be a particular problem. So if you want me to move it, Chair, I'll move it accepting officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was quite interested as we looked out of the bus window this morning at that land, because it's more gradients and levels than I've ever seen in my life. I mean, having to try to build anything more than 3 on there at the same level, you'd be off output. And I don't think we've really been given enough information either, looking at it. So I'll go along with the officers and support Paul on this one for refusal. Thank you.
I was just about to say the same thing. I mean, yes, it's you just can't get that many houses on that site, and I think it does need to. We do need to refuse it, and I will second Paul's recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm tempted to support the refusal as well. I mean, what surprised me is 22 different house designs. Why? Is there really a demand for 5 bedrooms in that area or not? Would it be better? There is. Oh, right, okay. I was just thinking, would it be better for more, more affordable, to be honest, because 5-bedroom houses tend to be rather expensive. And I think, yeah, maybe some more work needs doing on this waterfalls, because we're told there's only 2 places in Kirklees that actually has waterfalls. Can I actually tell you it's 3? I looked it up. So, but yeah.
In that case, can I ask that we add another reason for refusal, which is overdevelopment of the site, or some such words of that effect? Is that yeah?
Refused.
Withdrawn. That one at Mayfield. So we're on to page 107. This is the pre-app for Crossland Moor. I think it's been split, hasn't it?
Has it been split?
I think so. Yeah.
Is it all in private?
Yeah, I think it needs to be, because it needs to be. I mean, the applicants will be in.
Yeah.
The applicants will be discussing it.
Yeah.
It needs to be a private session because it's about viability.
Yeah.
Pre-app exclusion of the public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to announce it?
Yeah, I'll do it. This item, by the way, is going to be done in private, so we'll be switching microphones off and cameras and all that malarkey. Thanks everybody for attending this afternoon. See you again next month.